Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking with Dr. Robin Yap. Dr. Yap, great first segment there, talking about identifying and creating organizational or resilient organizations. Some really good information there. In this segment, I'd like to talk about change management. But before we go there, because there's a bit of a link, you hinted at it and talked about it briefly in our first segment, and that was understanding why. And as soon as I heard that, I thought of Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, the why, the how, and then the what. So is that also a key component of change management,
Oh,
organizational
definitely.
change management?
Yeah, definitely. And love Simon. And interestingly enough, with this starting with the why piece, is that as I mentioned before, people don't change, or I'm sorry, people do not resist change. What they resist is the fact that if they feel like they're being changed. So let me go backtrack first to what is the wrong way of doing this. So when we implement any type of change, whether big, small, whatever, announcing the change without any context is just wrong, right? You need to kind of provide reasons why we're doing what we're doing, some rationale around it. And also, we need to understand that there are some emotional dimensions. Again, being a humans first focused leader, you would want to ensure that there are some emotional dimensions on any type of transitions. And there's no such thing as a one size fits all. All the changes are contextual, and therefore understanding what the context is quite key. Um, and you also want to make sure that for individuals who try to the perception of resistance, I'm putting it in quotes, resistance is actually not defiance, more than it's just maybe valuable feedback, and therefore an understanding of why people actually behave the way they do, which then circles back into why people do what they do.
Mhm.
So this understanding of the why goes into reflection on what are these things that people are doing that are actually not always the best approach. And then you can go back into, okay, well, now this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is why we're changing. And then from there, we go into a lot of other pieces around um, understanding, um, models that are in place. Are they the ones we want to follow? Are there um, information that have previously been created, especially for large organizations that have been around for a while? And I've come into an organization in a similar fashion, wherein there's already processes in place. There are things that are happening that were actually good. That's why the organization is still around. And there are things that can potentially be modified. You don't want to just come in and go, okay, we're going to change everything. And that's not the way to do it. So, what are these things? Maybe small pockets of modification would be a good, like a pilot, would be able to then understand potential contextual challenges that you may have before a big bang. We never suggest big bang changes for
Mm.
any of the organizations that we work with. We always suggest, let's have a pilot. Let's figure out who the champions are. Let's then understand there are influencers in organizations, and they're the ones that there are informal influencers. They're not always the ones with the roles, but they're the ones that are fully connected and they understand what's going on, whether they've been around for a while or not. They have been able to navigate through the complexity of large organizations and be able to then tap into that knowledge. So why not do that? Right? And why not try to get them in and they become your champions? But again, to do that, you need to be transparent. You need to be able to explain to them why you're doing what you're doing. There you go.
What are your thoughts on honesty when it comes to change management? Because I had a situation, I guess we're going back 20 over just over 20 years ago, and the company I was working with was making some changes, and they said nobody is losing their jobs, no one is being impacted. And just before I left, entire departments were suddenly let go,
Yeah.
and everyone felt, well,
Betrayed.
yeah, betrayed, lied to, demoralized. Even the people that weren't impacted felt that way.
Yeah.
So With this change, what's your thoughts on being honest about the changes?
Yeah, so there is this whole idea of trust and change, right? Trust and honesty. So they're like a trifecta. And or they are not cause and effect, but they can be viewed as such.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is happening right now with AI. So a lot of our companies that we work with, they're incorporating AI and they're literally getting rid of departments to then be replaced by artificial intelligence. So how do you then say, okay, well, we're going to change and therefore this is what's going to happen? There are ways to actually manage that. One is you don't just dump in and say, okay, we're going to change all of you, we're going to fire everybody. There are the honesty needs to be more structured in the sense that you provide a plan, and that's where the honesty is. And what is that plan, and what would that actually mean for impact on the stakeholders that are affected by whatever change you're doing. So let's get an example of an AI being leveraged for a graphic design department, for example. And this is a real case that I've been working with. So what has happened is that the organization said, well, there's now AI that can pretty much do your department's job, but what we're going to do is we're going to do things. We can have voluntary um, retirements, voluntary um, terminations if you want to do that option. There's this next option. We can reskill you and be able to get you into a different department. We can provide you with your um, your opportunities for looking for other jobs. So then it is not just go away. It's more, I actually am supporting you by providing you with a menu of things, and then you choose which one would be most effective for you, so that then you can actually, be happy in this change, right? Knowing that there will be a termination at the end of that, but the fact that they understood what the impact is and the fact that they know that they're going to be supported is an important key. Any change is expensive. So leaders need to understand that, and they need to understand that, yeah, there might be an immediate feel good experience for the leader that gotten rid of people that they may not need anymore. But ultimately, at the end of the day, one, that's expensive, two, that's emotional impact. And then three, there's a lot of emotional labor that's incorporated into anything that's changed, that's being affected by change. So leaders need to understand that. They need to understand that again, they're people and therefore very complex, need to understand what their backgrounds are, need to understand what that actually means for their personal lives, and then be able to create opportunities for next steps for these individuals. So that's kind of what would be an important piece. And this organization that we're working with, that's kind of what they did. And they've been able to not really have a lot of challenges with individuals. People have taken, a lot of them have taken the voluntary termination piece because they actually got more money. And that's, for that to happen, again, it's expensive. You need to understand that you may need to do that. So it's not just the standard 1 month per year, for example. They were giving them 6 weeks per year. So therefore, individuals were like, well, that's actually better for me and I have more time. And that would be a good thing, right? So I think that's an important piece when it comes to these change initiatives.
How do you know if your change is working or not? How do you
Whew.
identify?
So there are a couple of ways to understand that. So one is, you know it's it is successful if there's a couple of levels. So one is essentially metrics, right? So are the implementation metrics actually being hit? And that's the checklist part. And unfortunately, we all have that. So we all have, like budget management, participation rates, in like if you have a new training that's involved, um, some system adoption rates, for example. Then there's a level two, which is much more important, which is behavioral. So, are people actually doing what you want them to do? Are they actually applying the processes that are now in place? Has performance actually improved? A very big thing about that. Very big about what's the attitude and what are people feeling about. And also, what is the quality of the execution now that the change has been implemented? And then if we look at it from, so that's the individual side, then concurrent to that would be the organizational impact. How is the organization actually performing now as it gets paired with all the other competition that they're playing in the same sandbox? Has customer satisfaction actually changed? So you're looking at now what the organization's impact is to the environment that they've been working with. Was their productivity, quality, efficiency, all of those things as an organization? Has that actually improved because of this change? Because ultimately, we wouldn't want to do any change if it is not for an improvement. We never really, you know, go the other. We don't devolve for change,
Yeah.
so we change for an evolution. So therefore, has that actually happened? And then, of course, we want to make sure that the human impact on both internal and external is actually addressed. Because ultimately, if I put a chat box for my website, for example, and we have seen this as a way to respond to all of my inquiries from my customers when I don't want any more, like I would have to because I want to get rid of all of my customer service agents. Have my customers actually been happy now? But because all they do is talk to chatbots, and then they're in this loop, and then they suddenly will start talking negatively about that experience, and there goes that change strategy, right? And you'll end up going back and go, okay, well, we need those people again. So have a better approach to doing that rather than just getting rid of people because you want to cut costs now. And then ultimately, at the end of all of that, you need to have some form of a sustainability strategy because it's not a one off. There is an impact to the organization and to the people. Can you actually sustain that? If you can sustain that, then how are you measuring that sustainment? Right. So that needs to be in place as well. And together, all of that would hopefully assist in this strategy.
One last question for this segment before we end here. Should you also take in consideration the impact on people that are not, let's say, being let go because
Definitely.
their colleagues and friends are suddenly not there anymore?
Yeah,
You
definitely.
to
And
take
that's
their into consideration.
definitely. So I really think that there are equal kind of appreciation to people's contributions, whether that is they're the ones getting impacted and they're being let go, or the ones who are still there, because especially the ones who are there, because they're the ones who will now have to carry the load of not just performing sometimes maybe double the work, but also training the next set of people. And are they happy about that? Because they might think they will be the next one that will be let go,
Right.
right? So there has to be a strategy for that as well. So
Great. Well, on that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. Today, we are talking with Dr. Robin Yap and about organizational change management. And in our third segment, we're going to talk about what we keep touching on and we keep pushing off to the side, one of my favorite topics, leadership.
me
We
too.
we will be right back.